This is Richard Wolff from Democracy at Work with another Wolff Responds here 7 weeks before the presidential election. I want to provide a context, both historical and economic, for what this election can and cannot resolve, no matter how it comes out. To do that, I want to begin, as I have in earlier broadcasts, with a reminder about the last time a pandemic destroyed an economic system. It's the 14th century. It's European feudalism, and the pandemic is called the Bubonic Plague or the Black Death, a raging disease that killed hundreds of millions, roughly a third of the population of Europe at that time. Now, Europe was divided into two categories of people. Those who did most of the work were called serfs. They worked on the land. Work was mostly agricultural then. The land was assigned to them. They did not own it, by the regional power in their area, called the lord of the area or the lord of the land. It's where landlord comes from. The serfs owed obligations to the lord. If you were born from a serf family, well, then you were a serf too, and you owed the same obligations to the lord. And the basic obligation, and this is crucial, was the following. Whether you worked on your own assigned piece of land, or you worked on land that the lord had assigned to himself, part of your output you got to keep. That's how you lived. What you ate, what you dressed yourself with, how you sustained your family. But another part of your output, you might call it a surplus over and above what you yourself consumed from your output, you delivered to the Lord. And it had a name, rent. You can see how many of our terms today have their origins in European feudalism. And the Lord took the rents paid to him by all of the serfs that he presided over. And that's how feudal society was supported, with all that surplus that all those serfs had delivered to the Lord. That's what paid for all the craftsmen that the Lord might sustain by feeding them and clothing them and housing them, to build those cathedrals that people go to Europe to see, or to build the cities that Europe slowly developed. In other words, feudal politics, feudal culture, feudal society, feudal cities, the whole apparatus of feudal society was supported and sustained by one key economic fact, that the mass of serfs produced more than they themselves consumed. And that more went to a relatively small number of people. Lords were a minority relative to the serfs, who were the majority. Just like masters were a minority in a slave society where the slaves were a majority, or like today when the employers are a minority and the mass of us are employees. So feudal society was sustained by the surplus of the serfs. Here's then the problem. When the virus hit, when the Black Death decimated European society, millions and millions of serfs died. Millions and millions got too sick to work. Bottom line, they couldn't deliver the surplus to their lords, from Scandinavia in the north to Italy in the south, from Germany and Russia in the east to England in the west. They couldn't deliver the surplus, and that meant that the political and cultural and urban life of whatever urban society had been created in feudalism disintegrated. In the long run, it was the end of feudalism. And now here's the lesson for us today. In those countries where COVID-19 has been deadly, killing huge numbers of people, rendering sick huge numbers of people who will be sick and unproductive for who knows how long. And we're not at the end of this pandemic, not even close. What is happening is in many societies, this pandemic has also led to unemployment. And in the forefront of countries using unemployment to cope with this crisis is the United States. Although it's not the only one, it has taken the lead. Millions of people are not working. Millions of people cannot work, will not work. Which means what? Well, it means the same to capitalism today that it meant to feudalism back in the 14th century. Surplus, the difference between what a worker is paid and what a worker adds to the value of the enterprise that pays him, what we call the profit, that's not being produced in every enterprise that is cutting back from what it did before. In every closed store, in every closed restaurant, you get the picture. Many, many fewer people working, much less profit produced. But that profit for capitalism has the same function that the rent had in feudalism. It is what sustains this society. Many of us working, producing a profit that a few, relatively, the employers get into their hands. That's how capitalism works. And the employers use that profit to build the buildings, to develop the cities, to hire all of the people who live off of the profits. You know, the ones who don't help make anything, but provide all kinds of services to enable those who do the work to be successful in doing it. The manager, the lawyer, the promoter, the advertiser. They are important to get the enterprise profitable, but they don't make whatever it is the enterprise sells. All of those people are sustained by the profits produced by those who do the work, just like feudalism was sustained by the surplus the serfs paid as rent. If there are millions and millions of people not working, if the labor is not being done, the jobs are not being filled, the machines are idle, gathering rust and dust, then that surplus, the profits, aren't there. And that means that the employer class doesn't have that wealth to spread around. So we're going to see, and this is the key point, fantastic struggles in the months and years ahead as different parts of our society fight for the shrinking amount of surplus or profits that our shut down economy, because we failed to prepare for and manage this pandemic, are delivering to us. Let me give you just a few examples. Tenants can't pay rent to landlords. Stores can't pay rents to their landlords. Individuals and families can't, which means the landlords are stuck. And the landlords, therefore, aren't getting the profits out of their buildings, whether they rent to a store or to an individual. And they, therefore, are stuck, but they don't want to be stuck. So they're not going to repay the banks they borrowed from, which puts their profits in trouble. Everybody is going to be fighting everybody in the courts, out of the courts, as the system crumbles. That's what happened in feudalism, too. You can't simply pretend your way out of this. You can't even have a stock market going up where money is floating around buying and selling shares while the real economy at the base of society has millions of people not producing profits and surplus the way they once did. This will take time, but it is the way systems crumble when they cannot manage the kinds of crises that feudalism failed to manage in the 14th century, and capitalism today, especially American, European, Japanese capitalism, are unable to manage today. That historical parallel should be kept in our minds as we go through and try to understand what is happening to us in these dark times. This is Richard Wolff for Democracy at Work.